Hi, everybody. Watching the attendees number grow. I realize people are entering the space now. I just want to thank everybody for coming today. This is, where we are now, a webinar that came from Heather, brought the idea to Workbook, and we have been doing it together ever since. I don't know, we get such wonderful feedback about this webinar and how important it is to a lot of people out there. And so thank you guys for that feedback. And we're so glad that we're doing something positive and good for the community. I just wanted to say a big thank you to my tech director, Jim. He works really hard on this, and I sometimes forget to thank him, and I just wanted to take a second and do that now. On with my amazing panel. I'm going to start off with Liz. Liz Miller-Gershfeld is a VP Executive Art Producer at Energy BBDO in Chicago. Her accounts include Wrigley's Gum Brands, Brown Forman, Bayer Brands, American Egg Board, and Ocean Spray. Liz says, in normal times, I am a bike commuter, hiker, road tripper, amateur, vegetarian, chef, and storyteller. I am quarantining in Chicago with my 2 teenage sons and my husband and my dog, and we play a lot of Don't Cross the Line, Cards Against Humanity. I really need you to explain what that means. Risk, and I'm working up my mixology skills. So that is Liz. Hannah Soto is here today. She's the founder and CEO of Grey House Productions, working with clients such as the Coca-Cola Company, Marriott, Apple, and Whirlpool. She is currently training for her second Olympic triathlon. Wowza.
Wow.
Good for you. Wow. This time around, she's training with her husband. That's so nice. Suzee Barrabee is a freelance art and print producer, has recently worked with clients such as PayPal, Panera, and One Medical. Suzee says, I am a terrible cook, but I have finally mastered 3 dishes: vegetable curry, vegetable chili, and vegetable soup. And I think my dog is bored of being with me. It's great. Vail Palmer-White is an executive producer at Photo Group, working on accounts such as SC Johnson, Ford, Pfizer, Waste Management, and Advil. Val says, I've done every job in this industry with the exception of hair and makeup because I can't even do my own. That's the greatest. Me either. So then there's Heather Elder. Heather is with Heather Elder Represents. She says she's surrounded by everyone and everything that she needs, including 2 Goldens and a bearded dragon. So
my bearded dragon.
It's not yours?
No.
We had one of those for a minute. And I'm Heidi Goverman. I work for Workbook, and I'm just really thrilled to be here. I feel like everybody already knows everything about me. So there's that. Let's start. So we're going to sort of set the stage here. Production as we know it came to a standstill about 6 weeks ago. We are hoping to get back very soon. Liz and Heather, what types of productions are you seeing out there right now? I think I'd like to start with Liz and then to Heather.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm seeing the same productions that everyone is seeing, a lot of productions that are user-generated or create from home productions, which is a great solution. Certainly, we're using more stock than ever before. And I personally am working on 3 or 4 illustration projects right now. So that's what's keeping me currently busy.
Yeah, and I would echo that and say that kind of what's coming through my email and across my desk right now is definitely a lot of stock requests, some for individual images, some for collections. So they're looking to find a collection of imagery that will work for an entire campaign. And also the create from home. I have a photographer next week who's doing a shoot from home, so it'll be kind of interesting to see how that works for him. But we are starting to get a couple of estimates for other types of jobs, but nothing that would be in the immediate future.
Is there a timeline that you could reference? Maybe, or is it June, July?
Yeah, it keeps moving. I think at first it was, how about May? And then it was like, what does your June look like? And hey, are you free in July? And it's kind of a funny email to get because we're like, we're all free. There's like nothing going on. But yes, I think the the timeline does keep moving. Everybody's hopeful that it would be sooner than later, but it varies.
Suzee, what are brands asking of their agencies right now in terms of production?
And I think it's interesting. I think that brands are looking to agencies to kind of solve some problems or even come up with ideas, just bringing them ideas of what they can do in this kind of limited workspace. So there's obviously CGI going on, but also, I mean, besides for user-generated content or from home, you know, people are looking at other options, live stream options, you know, just anything that can be thought of. And I think it's kind of a good creative exercise, you know, to have these limitations and really try to come up with something new. Because I think we've all seen the same commercial about 5 million times. So I think now it's got to go to the next step and figure out how you can break away from what other people are doing. So, and brands are looking at agencies to come up with those ideas.
I do think, at least from the artist community that I'm talking with, not just my own photographers, but other photographers and directors out there, they are starting to get creative now about how they can create work. One photographer of ours was just playing around with like Zoom photo shoots, right? Taking pictures of people through the computer, which is kind of interesting. So I think it'll be really cool to see over the next couple of weeks how people push it a little bit and try and create something that stands out a little bit more.
Okay, so Vail and, I'm sorry, Liz, what conversations around liability are being had at the agency and the client level?
Yeah. Well, I mean, any production needs to be approved at the client and agency's highest levels. There's a great deal of scrutiny on safety protocols, mitigating exposure, and liability. Any documents are going to reflect that for clients and vendors. But I think, you know, going back to what Heather was saying and Suzee, the questions are more around what's possible now. Everybody seems to care very deeply about safety for everyone involved. And that's the first thing in everyone's mind. And then what's possible in terms of getting our communications out right now? What are people doing? I saw this. How was this created? How are other people doing this? Are other people doing this? If I, as a producer, tell someone this can't be done, and then they find out that someone did do it or did it in a different way, we want to know how it was done. So those are the kinds of conversations. It's very much a work in progress. Nobody has all the answers.
Fair enough. So Vail and Heather, are you guys doing estimates?
Yeah, it's starting to come through my desk. I mean, for a while it's been pretty quiet, but now I'm starting to see people test the waters for simpler shoots. I think people are being considerate so far of what I've seen, of the, I hate the word the new normal, but you know, of what we're going through right now. And I look forward to it, you know, more specific campaigns that are a little more geared. It's kind of exciting. It's something that was done, I think we were doing 20 years ago, then we got into all the library shoots, but these seem a little more thoughtful. And those are, you know, just as exciting to work on. So it's nice to see, but you know, I don't anticipate starting to shoot or be able to be ready to go on set before July 1st at least, or you know, and I think for New York, it might be a little bit later, unfortunately, depending on how they can control their outbreak over there.
I would say there's a few things happening over here. We are working on estimates that we were doing pre-pandemic. So people are wondering, how are we going to evolve those jobs to work in the current climate? Then there definitely are some estimates that are coming across my desk, like as I had said earlier. But I feel like what's starting to happen now are more conversations. Hey, we've got this project that we're thinking about. Can we start a conversation? And that makes me really hopeful, because I think that what's going to be really important coming up is that the photographer and their crew get involved in the conversations way before the creative is completely settled. You know, they're going to need to know how something is going to be produced and gotten done before created, before they can get a client to sign off on something. So I'm excited about the idea of increased collaboration.
Really interesting. And in the past, it's just, here's the idea. But yeah, that's really interesting. There's a question from Steve here that says, I've had several clients express surprise that I'm not busy. Do you think clients are disconnected or too distracted to realize that most creatives are not working? I don't know who that's for exactly. Maybe Liz?
I should unmute. Our clients are very dialed in on what's going on. So I can't really, I'd be curious to understand more about.
Yeah, I find that surprising too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that sounds like a unique person who, you know, is that sort of out of touch with just everybody and what's going on.
Sure. Okay. Like, I'm going to move on. As shelter-in-place restrictions are being lifted, are you seeing production asks changing? I'm going to go to Hannah.
Absolutely. I think that we all know the answer to that the ask is changing. What I think's been changing more so in the last 4 or 5 weeks is our response. What we knew 4 weeks ago is different than what we knew today, which is different than what we knew yesterday. So even as we're having this conversation, what we maybe say today could be irrelevant on Tuesday.
I would also add to that the shelter-in-place restrictions are different all over the country. So it's getting a little bit challenging, because I think the lines are getting grayed and people are trying to figure out what they can do and what they can do safe. I don't want to say safely, but while social distancing. And maybe you're not having a whole crew, but you're, you know, finding people in your neighborhood to shoot or something like that. But yeah, it's interesting to see it evolve.
Well, and different states have different restrictions. So someone in another state may be able to do legally what somebody obviously in the middle of New York City cannot do, or in California. Okay, so let's get into, you know, in the near future, you know, questions. In anticipation of our future on set, groups of producers have been talking about what sort of protocols or guidelines need to exist in order to produce effectively and safely. This is a big question, but can you describe some of those guidelines? I'm going to start with Hannah, crafts services.
Yeah. So first, I just want to acknowledge and thank all the producers and production specialists who have really been banding together. We've been linking arms and saying, how can we collaborate? How can we support each other? How can we come up with these ideas and be sharing resources and thoughts and strategies? So some of those conversations have led to guidelines, like knowing that we can't do a communal craft service, like there's not going to be a craft service table, and even the craft itself. Initially we said, well, maybe it should all be single serve packaging, but in a conversation yesterday with one of my coordinators, she brought up that still brings everybody to a common table to take those individual snacks. So we're exploring the possibility of having like little bags that everybody gets that's their crafty for the day, and they can use it, they can not, and that it's a little bit curated based on what their dietary preferences are. But even thinking about something like grabbing a drink from a cooler. On a call yesterday with an OSHA specialist, they talked about cold, cool environments really being where this virus can live. And so a cooler is a prime example. And so how do we make sure that either only a designated person is in the cooler, or we find different ways to serve beverages? I think also thinking about the water dispensers. So many of us have taken large steps to be more sustainable in production. And I know some people have just said, we're going to go back to plastic bottles or boxed water. And I think there's a solution somewhere in between. If whether we have disposable wipes that we can wipe the button off, or we have, again, one person that's designated to fill bottles. And then even thinking about catering, we certainly can't do communal buffet style lunches. That's not an option. But conversations we've had is everything from box individual meals to doing on smaller shoots. There's the potential to give a per diem where crew would bring their own lunches. Vail and I were talking yesterday about the difficulties with that is, of course, refrigeration and having access to a microwave, or if somebody wants to run out to grab lunch. And so those are some of the things we're still solving. But I think having people designated for certain areas of a production are going to come in really key as it relates to food.
That's so much to think about. Like, I mean, it's a, sorry. I'm going to just move right to Vail. It is. It's a lot. Just the minutia in which you have to dissect that is extraordinary. And that takes me to Vail and the OSHA recommendations and certifications.
Yeah, so every company is going to be different. Samantha Isom, who was an assistant and now a photographer in her own right, was working with this ocean compliance company and have been working to design something related to photography so that our crews, or specifically something I'm going to do and promote, is our crews get certified to understand the basic science of this virus. I think that's the hardest thing, that we're not doctors, we're not infectious disease specialists, but we have a level of responsibility that everyone on our crews, including talent, including clients if they choose to come, which I don't think they will be for a while, but are accountable for what they do on set and what they do offset, because it's going to affect coming into work. I think every industry, not only ours, is going to have to go through this. It is so important to be linked in with OSHA and CDC as well, because we're going to have to keep records of our shoots. We are opened up to potential lawsuits or defending lawsuits, and safety of our crew. So we want to be able to mitigate any sort of danger or any sort of liability and safety issues. We'll never eliminate them. That should be said. It is all about mitigation and proper mitigation and record keeping. But in order to do that, you need to have a base knowledge. You can listen to Fauci on one end, and then someone turns on CNN and there's a different doctor saying something different, or BBC or the World Health Organization versus CDC. You need sort of a central body where everyone's following, and they can take those practices home. And when they come back, they take those practices here, and everyone is accountable, because I can't mother everyone. I don't think, even as she was talking about craft services, we need to know things like how long this virus lasts on surfaces so that we can set up really consistent guidelines that wardrobe stylists and prop stylists and makeup artists can take home with them and from job to job. And hopefully with all this compliance, what we've done is we've set up great practices so that when flu season comes back in October, November, we're now in a place where maybe we don't have to lock down because our safety processes, our processes are in place, and everyone's abiding by it. I mean, that's what we want, sustainability. We don't want to go into lockdown for another 2 months if we don't have to.
Of course. Okay, so Hannah, does crew talent? I'm sorry, tripping over my words. Does I'm going to try this one more time. Does the crew, client, agency, it's like all three of those entities, do they need to sign
tongue twister?
I know, I believe I wrote it, which makes it even more obnoxious. But does crew and the client and the agency need to sign a waiver before COVID-19 shoots for the sake of liability?
That has been a big conversation in our groups. We've talked about having anyone that steps on set sign a waiver of self-assessment of health, where they say that they've been healthy, they've not traveled out of the country. On the flip side of that, there have been conversations about privacy protection and what are we allowed to ask. There have been talks of indemnification agreements where that basically would be comparable to a hold harmless on a location, which means that whoever signs it is saying they wouldn't hold person X, Y, and Z liable if they were to contract COVID. There's also, one thing to keep in mind is that none of these waivers are foolproof, but they are steps to, I think, more than have the piece of paper as proof. It's about conversation and awareness, and we can use that piece of paper to facilitate accountability, to facilitate what are the expectations that our crew members have of us, what are the expectations that clients have of us, and what are the expectations that we have of them. What we don't want to do is turn such an amazing industry into just trading papers back and forth. We have such a collaborative team spirit on set, and we don't want to lose that, but we're having to balance that with some new responsibilities here.
I mean, yes, what an interesting point, the team spirit on set and all of the impact of this. I mean, you're afraid of, you don't want to be afraid of each other, right?
We were shooting in Atlanta during when the national emergency was given, and crew morale just spiraled and people were afraid to work and afraid not to work. And we, of course, gave everyone the option to go home, but no one felt like they could take that option. And it was one of the most difficult things emotionally I've had to walk through a team with.
Wow. Okay, so Vail, I wanted to ask you and Heather, and I'll start with Vail and then I'll go to Heather. Will language change in casting specs, purchase orders regarding safety on set, etc.? If so, can you share that language? So I'm going to start with Vail, and then I'm going to go to Heather.
Yeah, I mean, everything is gonna change. I mean, we're still working on how that's gonna change. You know, casting is the least area that I'm concerned with. I think self-submitting, we have options for that people can be remote, and we can provide links, and it will almost feel seamless for the client and for the agency. That's my least of concern, but our steps on set are going to change. We are going to have to make sure that we are providing direction at all times for our teams, and that we're going to slow down a little bit, especially in the beginning as we figure out systems, what works, what doesn't work. And I think that's key. I think once our processes and our teams get really solidified, things may loosen up and speed up a bit because of comfort. But until then, we are going to have to slow down, be more mindful in the beginning of how we're taking each aspect, as you saw, from craft services to water coolers to, handing off equipment to one another. It's all going to change as we develop new habits. And that is something that I think the agency and the client have to be aware of. But we, as Hannah said, we have a community of producers that at the moment this happened, a large conversation happened, and everyone has been mobilizing to figure this out, to find solutions. Our crews have been mobilizing to find solutions, which just shows the ingenuity and the resilience of this community.
Heather, can you add to that?
Sure. I think it's important also to point out that there are conversations happening on the rep end as well. The agents have been getting together and talking amongst themselves and talking to lawyers and figuring out what our terms and conditions are going to need to look like to protect us, to make sure that we can be there for our crew, and to make sure we have a relationship. We're all kind of on the same page when it comes to payments, advances, all of those sort of things. And once we have those, we're pretty close. And once we have those, we want to start reaching out to the art production community and sharing them with them and getting their feedback on, what they think is possible and why or why not. And then, we're moving really quickly, but then sharing it globally so that everybody has the same suggestion of terms and conditions on the photographer director side, and be able to talk to those, have those having had those conversations ahead of time before we're actually talking about it for a job, talking about them ahead of time so we all know what we're up against.
Yeah, and production is aligning with the reps in order to do that. So I think we're sort of coming together as one solid team, not as a fragmented group. We're trying to limit liability, not only for ourselves, for the agencies, for the clients. We want to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward to ease the insecurity that we all have going on right now by doing that and getting our terms together and trying to think 10 steps ahead of each situation, because that's what we're doing now. This is a massive challenge.
And I would add that, I've been doing this for 25 years, and what it's always come down to is the relationships and how important the relationships are in this industry. And I've just seen such amazing generosity of spirit from everyone working together and trying to figure it out. And I just know that, if I called Liz or Suzee or, anyone on the art production side and said, I need to go over these protocols with you, I need to go over these terms and conditions with you, the input that we get is going to be invaluable and make it even stronger. So I see anything that any of us go out there with publicly is going to have been vetted by an entire community of people who are very interested in moving the industry forward.
And I will say, from an agency perspective, our agency came out with liability documents very quickly, and it was for the client to sign, and as well as any vendors or contracted people. And I'm sure those will evolve because, whether we like it or not, the lawyers will definitely have a say. And and I think that's just going to be a whole new language. But the good thing is it probably is going to be very standardized, which is nice because I don't think we've really had very standard language in the past. So I'm hoping that that's a good step forward for everybody.
Well, and what's so important is with all of these production practices that the production community and the agent community with all of the photographers, that you're all aligned. So nobody's undercutting anyone else on these practices, because when those practices, which I completely agree with, have a financial implication, it's our job then to defend them point by point, and also communicate to our clients that this is an industry standard. This is how things are being done. It's mitigating any sort of exposure to illness and all kinds of bad implications, and it will make sense. But that alignment is a very important part of it.
And that it's in the best interest of the client, ultimately.
Absolutely. Everybody, human beings.
Yeah.
It's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. Well, you guys are like answering my questions before I'm asking them, that's the best kind of a conversation. Because I was going to ask, Suzee and Liz, how do you think the account people and clients were going to react to all of these? So you guys already sort of got there for me. Hannah, how do these guidelines, how do you think these are going to affect set efficiency and costs? And I want to expand on that by one of the questions that came along here was, is there going to be sort of a health czar on set, a new person in that regard? So Hannah, could you speak to that for me a minute?
Absolutely. I kind of have this broken down into a couple of sections, but one thing I saw come up in the chat a couple times was asking about sick leave and how that pertains to if the guidelines are, you show these symptoms, don't come in to set, which should be an obvious given. We are trying to work for a solution to that. And I think that it is a little bit dependent on each production and the length of the booking and knowing that labor law does require a certain number of hours to be accrued of sick leave based on the number of hours that you work. But in our industry, that's really hard to apply when you're being booked for a few days, and then you can go several months without being booked with that same team. So we're working on finding a solution to that. I don't have an immediate answer, but it's very much on our agenda to find a solution for. But about efficiency as a whole, I think all of us share the same understanding that things are going to move a lot slower. We're going to be slower to load in. We're going to be slower in prep time, making sure that we're cleaning before and after set, potentially giving hotels for homeowners and doing cleaning before set and again after, so the homeowners can return to location. There was a job that we were bidding before all of this happened that was a 2-day shoot, and we were planning to have 2 crews so that one could light while the other follows behind to shoot. And that's just not possible for many reasons. And so that 2-day shoot turned into a 5-day shoot as we're rebidding it now for June or July, whenever it's appropriate to do so. And so I think that's the hardest part, because all of us here want to serve our clients well, and we want to be efficient, and we want to be strategic and think about the best way to solve a problem. And to come and say that problem is solved by adding to the bottom line is something that in some cases is inevitable, but we want to make sure that we've explored all other solutions and that we've minimized the additional costs where we can find some efficiencies.
Yeah, I think in luxury, we know when you're talking about some of the things that have become standard on set but aren't necessarily are more of a luxury. I think we're going to start to scale back on those to find efficiencies there. Health and safety is going to be a priority. I think production in general is going to need more help and more hands, just to make sure people are complying with the protocols. And I think that's really important. And also, we don't really know where locations are feeling on this. I mean, some of the locations that I've spoken to that are wrapped are worried that they're going to lose some of their homeowners. So it's a balance right now as everyone tries to figure it out. Everyone's so unsure, but I think we'll be able to get back on set, and we are going to have those extra prep days to make load in a bit longer. I mean, to make load in more efficient, but longer. Maybe it's a day before. And while we're on set, just to be mindful as we're moving. It's going to be a well-orchestrated dance, if you will, 6 feet away.
Can I bring up, especially from the agency point of view, because I think we touched on before, like it was such a big thing to do library shoots, and that involved a lot of flexibility and a lot of like, oh, let's try this on set. And that is not going to be able to happen anymore, because you can't just bring in another person, or you're not going to have that flexibility. And the other efficiency that agencies like to think they got was shooting motion and stills at the same time. That's probably not going to happen. That's too many people, too much of a crew. So I think that there's a lot of things that when you say efficiency, it's just going to be different. And maybe, like I said, I think a lot of really good and better things will come out of it. I think there's just going to be a time period where it's going to be a learning process for everybody. And so I think we will become more efficient over time, but right now, in the beginning, it's going to take a lot of learnings and a lot of big precautions. But it's, as everybody said, it's teamwork. And I think that's what's going to be great about this, is everybody wants to get back to work. And so I think the teamwork and just being back together again is going to be the blessing of this all.
Even to bid specs, just for a producer as they're creating these budgets, from my perspective, really knowing what I'm bidding on, knowing how many talent I'm going to need, knowing how many locations. I used to bid on jobs that sometimes didn't have very much information. And now I don't know how to proceed unless it's really laid out for me, because I'm going to need to think about this in terms of time and start schedules as I'm estimating. Everyone's going to need a little more prep time and wrap time to do this. Clothes may need to sit for a while. Wardrobe stylists may need to plan ahead and pack. And we really don't know what the return policies are going to be for some of these vendors now. So we might have to look to things like rentals, and there may be more purchases, not returns, depending on that. So we do need to be flexible, whether it's a variance that the agency holds on their side for overages in the beginning, or if it's something that we have the variance on. But it's got to be a constant communication between agency and producer and rep or photographer, whoever at that point needs to be involved. But so there are no surprises. I think as a producer, and I know from a photographer standpoint and from a rep standpoint and from your standpoint, from an art buyer standpoint, no one likes surprises. So I think if we're really conscious about how we're estimating this, because we know what the creative is, it's going to make it all of us as we're figuring this out.
So can I ask a question of Suzee and Liz? Keeping all of this in mind, are you guys having conversations with your clients? Are your agencies talking to your clients about what to expect? I mean, do they think that once we're back to work, we're going to be able to be as efficient as we always have been?
We're having preliminary conversations, and they're more internal than anything at this point. I think that all of these protocols, of course, make sense, but they will have implications. They'll have financial implications, of course, as they should. And I think then that we're going to be tasked with solving the question of, is what we're trying to communicate something that we can simplify then? If the idea as it currently stands is going to result in a production that is much more expensive than we had perhaps anticipated or our clients had anticipated, how can we simplify this? Can we look at casting an intact family versus casting people who don't know each other, and we have to bring major protocols in to deal with them? Do we have them bring their own wardrobe? Do we shoot them in their own home? I mean, a lot of the things that are working so nicely for the create in place model, are we going to then lean back into those sorts of things? So I think we're going to be tasked with coming back with solutions that are, okay, the idea as it is currently boarded is going to require a lot of additional protocols. Those protocols are standard across production. People are all agreeing, this is what they cost, this is what's needed. Bring us a simplified idea that still gets across what's important to us being clients, what's important, what we had to get, what we wanted to communicate, and how can we do this in a more simple way. So in terms of adding time, I do think that we're going to need more time added to the estimating process, because I think we're going to have to think it through. And I also think we're going to have to work on buy-in. In that, first, when we're determining what's really important here about the communication, but also when we have partners like cost consultants, it's important for them to buy in and understand. And so that's my thought.
Yeah, I agree.
Just to add to that, yeah, it's just an education process, and it's really, right now it's internal first, and then really rolling it out to the clients and helping them understand. Most of the clients I know aren't ready yet to delve back into productions yet, but they will be hopefully very soon. So it is.
And I think,
it's all about educate. It's just about education.
And I think, think back to 3 and 4 years ago when we started doing payroll in the stills community. And that was a huge hurdle of education, where every single time we put payroll on an estimate, people wanted to know why, or even before it got to the agency, my photographers and directors would not understand why there was such an increase. And the way that we got over that hump together was through education and communication. And I think that's going to be the exact same way we get over this.
Yeah.
And
And we look at the benefits for something that we did with payroll. The benefits are, for the most of us who have put through payroll, those assistants now can pull from unemployment. Thank God, in the time of thing, there is a community responsibility here for better business practices. And I think, as the stills community, we are striving for that as well. Because I think it does so much better for all of us when we're acting appropriately.
I want to take a turn right now and ask Hannah, what are the insurance implications of COVID-19 regarding productions and liability in the future? I think that
Sure.
Pull out your crystal ball and
let me be a mind reader now. No, there are a couple things that we know are true right now. One is that no insurance is covering anything related to COVID-19. So if a shoot is canceled or postponed, that is not considered force majeure, and that would not be covered by insurance. One thing that I did have to clarify with a location scout is that does not mean that we don't still have general liability. We can still issue COIs to homeowners. That coverage remains the same. What I anticipate will happen in the future is, much like after 9/11, we saw amendments to insurance policies for additional premiums to cover terrorism, acts of terrorism. I think the same thing will happen for additional premiums. We can opt to buy coverage for pandemics. I think that that's probably far from being available, several months, if not a year. But one thing that is, maybe more. Even another form of insurance is workers' comp. And that's coming in very important now, because workers' comp would still right now cover if someone were to become sick on set with COVID, as long as it can be traced back to acquiring it on set. In the same way, if they break their leg on set and workers' comp comes in to cover that, it would cover this the same way. And so one thing to think about, if we have payroll and workers' comp is covered there, but you're paying some of your vendors or those who are incorporated not on payroll, you need to have an additional workers' comp policy to cover those workers as well. I think one thing that can help with insurance and liability is making sure that we have crew members who are certified with OSHA. And that can be a person who's on set, who's making sure that sanitation processes are being met, that we're following these guidelines, but also making sure that we give some sanitation certifications for hair and makeup artists. That's nothing that we've monitored before. And I think that's going to be something that we see in the future.
Really big note is contracts. The insurance is a certificate. Passing a certificate to a location does not guarantee your insurance. You have to have proper contracts in place between all your vendors and yourself. There's insurance most likely does not like to pay out, and so your contracts need to be rock solid all the time. And see that workman's comp policies will probably go up. I can see that you will find insurance premiums and policies going up.
Somebody just wrote in, we're currently bidding jobs for July and August tentatively, depending on the local situations. We are adding PPE equipment, including hazmat suits for sorry, I'm not reading this correctly, including hazmat suit for crew medics on set, and having the clients cover the insurance and indemnity for COVID-19. So far, there's no pushback from our clients, and our clients are agreeing to these added costs in insurance and indemnity. What are you all seeing from clients with regard to these items? I would assume that's to Heather, Vail, and Hannah.
I don't think we're there yet. I mean, I think I certainly, don't even know what these costs are going to amount to yet. You know, we do know that we're going to have someone who's dedicated to safety. We know that set medics are going to be required on set. Right now, there's a shortage of PPE equipment. That's another issue that we have to consider. There's a shortage of hand sanitation. There's a shortage of masks. All of this stuff will need to be worked out. There's no testing. I mean, that should also be clear. A lot of people say they're going to implement testing, which is great. However, that's going to be a supply issue. So all of that stuff's going to come into play. We've talked to, many of us use BlinkBid, and we've talked to Lou, who is the owner of BlinkBid, and he's looking at even providing a health and safety markup so that we can try and, you know, have a little flexibility with cost based on the cost of the production to sort of manage this until we know all the prices as they come in, because we don't know that yet. I doubt people will push back. I mean, at the end of the day, would you send your child into the environment? You know what I mean? That should be the basis of it. So you want it to be safe. So,
Or your mom.
Or your mom. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that, you know, I oftentimes there's a tension about cost, and we ask that about clients, but the reality is, as Liz said, they're humans too. They care about safety of the team. And I don't think that if we stick to education and communication, that won't be something we can solve for.
I'd love.
Oh, sorry, just really quickly. I also think, and it's been really eye-opening to me, just the level of detail, especially that the producers are looking at, because I don't think in general, you know, they would drill down to the detail that we need to, you know, and just if somebody says, oh, you know, we'll have PPE on set, and clients will be great, you know, but I don't think they're going to think about, you know, and maybe they shouldn't have to, they should just know that it exists, that we are looking at what a safe set means.
Well, I was just going to say, it's interesting because the very next question is to you, Suzee, and it was, what are your clients' biggest concerns about going on set again? And you're saying, or you just said, they are not thinking about it as deeply in this way, but what do you think their biggest, or what do you know their biggest concerns are?
I actually am not really sure, because we haven't really gotten to that point, you know, but my guess is that fewer clients will be on set, if at all. And so this is going to probably be a segue into another discussion, but there's so much discussion around how to communicate from a set. Live streaming, that is going to be a huge issue on how to run a set, run a production, and be in communication with clients, creatives, whatever, without having them on set. So I think that is actually another issue that's come up more than anything, is setting up a system for communication.
Well, and drafting off of that, I had an interesting conversation, or heard a photographer yesterday talk about this, and had a separate conversation with him later, this idea that he wants the communication to work both ways, the streaming to work both ways, because he did a shoot, this was Tim Tatter, and he did a shoot right before the everything kind of went into lockdown, and they live streamed it. And he said what he missed was seeing their reaction to what he was doing. He said, so then what he would change is the next time he does this, he wants to make sure that communication is both ways, so that he can, you know, gauge what, as opposed to just seeing a text or hearing them say something, like seeing their reaction. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, we absolutely need to figure that out.
Well, this is so exciting. I mean, I have to say, I'm like really excited about the technology here. I just got off the phone before this call with my tech in New York, and he's fabulous, but he's already proactively set up these systems, even a private website he's looking into. He's doing the two-way chats. He even remotely, at one point, he remotely teched a shoot, you know, he from a photographer's studio. So he handled all the digital files from his house in New York, and then was able to give unlimited access to 20 people. I mean, so the technology is there. People just have to figure it out. And there's a small amount of techs that are doing it, but it will, you know, more and more people will be able to do it. And it's fascinating. And you can do this with video as well. There's less in the video community that are able to do it. But that's a technology that's going to come up, which is great for even making less, you know, having less people on set and less exposure. So I'm excited about this. I think it's an awesome option that we're able to go, and these techs who are getting their systems together and being able to share it with us is going to be invaluable over the next year and a half.
I've been hearing about people making strides in that technology as well. And that's going to be one of the first questions, I think, back to the question about what are the clients talking about. They're going to want to know they're going to want to know, when is it safe for us to start shooting again, and how can we do it? How can we do it safely? How can we be most efficient? We understand there are going to be additional protocols, but how can we get going and do this well? And how can we do the remote approvals? How can we do it seamlessly? What's the best technology that everyone is using and they're going to want to know what is the best, what is the most seamless, what is the least expensive. These are all the things that we need to sort of be wrapping our heads around so that we can get back into it.
And I would think secure, right?
And secure, absolutely. Yes, that's a big one.
Yeah, and I think you're able to do that, you know, that the technology is there and they're moving fast. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I would say we're going to have additional Wi-Fi systems on set. But think about it, client and agency aren't traveling as much. We've saved on hotels and per diems and flights, and that cost gets transferred maybe on a production end. But there's ways to transfer that cost. So even though we're going up in certain ends, we're decreasing on a lot of ends as well. So that's an interesting thing. I think productions for a while will be very local. I can't imagine too many people traveling. That's also going to save money, a lot of money, I think, in areas. So there are ways to find efficiencies. I think just in the very beginning of this, we're going to have growing pains. And I think we need to be, you know, open to that.
We've come so far. Like, give us another 6 weeks and imagine where we'll be. Like,
that's right,
nailed it in 6 weeks. We've done so much.
Absolutely.
So
it's kind of an exciting time in a weird way for ingenuity.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely.
Well, I have to say that you guys have answered. I haven't had to ask them. You've answered like I'm following along, and you're totally nailing it. You guys are so, you know, jumping in at the right places and so on. So I'm going to just compliment all of you for just, you know, really moving the conversation forward in a very, very cohesive way. I feel a little, you know, what am I here for? But you guys did, I mean, awesome. I think that you're also thoughtful, right? You're just really thinking everything through and the details and so on. I'm finding that really, really, you know, encouraging, because this is so insane, right? I mean, so anyways, I always get emotional on these. Why is that? Anyway, I wondered if anybody wanted to add any areas or points that you didn't feel like that we got to. I mean, we've had some questions on the site, and some of them are just super specific. So the conversation, I felt like, covered a lot of this, of what was being asked. But if any of you guys had anything that you wanted to add, we're sort of nearing the end here. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything that we didn't necessarily cover. Heather, I'd love to start with you on that.
Yeah. You know, I'd like to speak to the photographers directly who are listening and let them know that right now, really start figuring out what your capabilities are. Because in the past, people would come to you because of what you could create for them and the vision that you had or the style that you had. But they're really going to start to need you sooner in the process, and they're going to need to understand what you're capable of creating and how. And I wouldn't be surprised if that people first go to the vendors that they know and trust at first. But if you can communicate your capabilities well, I think that's going to be really important. And so is the idea of communication. You're going to have to be a very good communicator right now, and on set. And if you are not that type of person, because you've chosen to communicate visually, then find someone who is and can help translate for you, because I think those two things are going to be really crucial beyond the type of photography you do. So.
Yeah, I think that's an extension of what you said earlier. You're going to get pulled, the artist is going to get pulled into the process earlier
For
as
sure.
a solution maker. And when we had the panel, a couple of weeks ago, the CCO said the same thing. Show us how you can change, this.
Yeah, we're seeing it already.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really important. So.
Okay, I'd love to go to Liz next, in terms of anything that you might wanted to add right now, or something that we didn't get to.
It's an overwhelming time. It's kind of hard to encapsulate, every thought for your listeners at this point. I've been doing this for more than 20 years, and I have to say that I never stop being amazed by the resilience, the inventiveness, the ingenuity, and frankly, the kindness in this community. It's really, it's touching, and creativity finds a way to express itself in creative people, and I receive a lot of communications from photographers and agents showing, one, a lot of empathy and caring, like, how are you doing? And number two, here, to Heather's point, here are examples of what I'm making right now with what I have. And it is not being ignored. I am looking at each and every one of them, and am very impressed. And we just have to continue with this inventiveness as we go into this, because we're all making it up as we go along. We all are.
Hey, Hannah, I wanted to go to you next. Thank you so much, Liz. That was very, feel good, and I agree 100%. Hannah, would you like to chime in for me?
Yes, I have two things actually. So first is, I know that there is still a lot that we don't know, that there's questions we weren't able to answer that we're working to get the answer. Someone said earlier today, and this is representative of the 6 faces you see here, but the countless faces behind the scenes that we've had conversations with, that we're sprinting so that then everybody else can walk. And so right now we're kind of at a point that we're saying, here are things that may need to happen on set, and here are things that must happen on set. And those are going to continue to change. But also, I know that the industry as a whole is nervous because we've seen a lot of user-generated content, a lot of stock usage. And I think that has been necessary and important in this time. But if you think about maybe 3 years ago, when authenticity became really important in brands, that consumers wanted authenticity, that's going to continue to be true. And they're going to want to see content that speaks to this time, because it has changed the lives of people across the world. And so we're going to have the opportunity to create advertising that speaks to that. But we just need to make sure we can do it safely first. So bear with us. We will get back to creating.
Suzee, could you maybe chime in on anything that we haven't covered or that you wanted to maybe address?
No, it's funny, Hannah touched on that, because I think agencies have gotten used to, now in this time of user-generated content. And I think there's going to be, an excitement to come back to creating new content, because everything is a little bit melding together. But the great thing is, to me, it's almost from the ashes, something new is going to arise. And I think it's really exciting. And I think Vail said the same thing. There's so much new, and just a different way to work, a different way of looking at work, a different way of creating work. And I'm sad that, it had to happen through something so horrific as what we're going through. But I think that there's going to be some major steps forward in how we utilize technology, how we think about things. And I think that's the real positive side, is I think it's just the way we're going to approach everything is going to be different. And I think that's a good thing.
Vail, would you like, is there anything you felt like we didn't hit on that you wanted to make sure we touched on?
You know, I'm just reading some of the comments on the chats, and it seems like a lot of people are worried, crew members and talent, about their safety and what they need to put in their contracts. I would say, you know, and I've told this to my stylist specifically, you know, no one, we love you, right? We take care of you. We want you're our team. We can't do what we do without you. Put your systems in place. Put your teams in place. If you get sick, someone can take over for you. You know, you don't have to lose work. You can work remotely. We're in an amazing digital age where we can do that, where we can work together as a community. No one has to suffer. You know, everyone has come together. So just put your systems in place. Talent, we're thinking about you. Your safety, makeup chairs, we're all working through that. Knowing that makeup is probably the one that everyone's a little insecure about, we're doing that. So just give us some time to put our systems together. We have a good 2 months, I think, before we're really back on set legitimately. And by then, people will be trained, will understand the science, and that will really help us to be efficient and not just put in protocols that we think will work, that protocols that can actually help.
So I always like to end these with everyone's silver linings, you know, the thing that came out of, and it could be personal or professional, but what's come out of all of this that, you know, is the positive. Before we go to that, I did want to say, you know, there are some resources that that we like to provide whenever we can, and I know that Vail and Hannah are putting together some of these things. Right now, they're extraordinarily internal, and so they're not sharing them yet. But Hannah, I think that you had something to say on that. I'm just going to ask you to
yes.
articulate.
So we are working on building a guide, and we have that initial skeleton. It's not ready for public yet, but if you go to our Instagram, that link, you can sign up and be emailed that document. We're going to make it available for free download to anybody that wants it. So you can sign up now, again, through the link in our Instagram profile, and make sure that you get a copy of that when it's ready to share.
Perfect. Okay, so silver linings. I feel like Liz, that you kind of said that already, but I wondered if you wanted to add a little bit to it.
I mean, my silver lining is personal, and it's spending time with my teenage sons, who otherwise probably would choose not to spend as much time with me.
Okay, I have teenage sons. I can completely relate.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd love to go to Vail. I'm gonna get it. I will. I swear
Okay.
to God. Vail, would you give us your silver lining?
Yeah, I mean, it's how the community has come together. I think that's just an amazing thing. And honestly, the time I get to spend at home with my family too. I work a lot. I'm still working now all the time, but you know, it's this community feeling. I don't think I've felt so dialed into a community that I have in the last 8 weeks. It's been pretty amazing. Pretty spectacular people out there. This is a pretty phenomenal community, and we're so lucky to be in it.
Suzee, could I ask you to chime in with your silver lining?
Gosh, I think I said it all before, but I totally agree with the community, and I am always in awe of watching a community come together in just very unselfish, very generous ways. And even just the creation of this, you know, these webinars, I mean, that hadn't happened before, and now it's happening. And thank you guys for that. I think it's such a great resource. And there's different sites to help crew. And I think that is always amazing, because they've always been there for us, and you know, it's time to give back too.
So Hannah, I was gonna go to you. You're here on my screen.
Hi. I think that we have this tremendous opportunity right now to work on our business and redefine some of the areas that didn't have structure and set standards and work on the foundation of it that will transform how production is done for decades to come. And that really excites me.
So much. And Heather?
You know, beyond the community, the obvious community generosity and the being surrounded by family, this idea that we now have permission to not only take the time, but put the thought into what our next best industry will look like, you know, from a creativity point of view and a production point of view. I'm really appreciating all of these conversations and these calls and this time to spend with everyone and we're all on the same page trying to figure out, you know, what we can do to be better situated for the future. And I appreciate that time to do that.
I think that's wonderful. I mean, it's true. We all have a lot of time right now, and sometimes it feels like it's constricting me, and sometimes it feels like it's freeing me. So I think that it is a gift. The time for thoughtfulness is a really serious gift right now. So I just want to wrap this up by saying to everyone, thank you so much for your time. You guys are my silver lining for sure. Every week we are putting these panels together, and every week we have generous people who are willing to give us their time and their knowledge, and I'm extraordinarily thankful for that. So I just want to say that, and you guys are awesome sauce. I'm already seeing in the comments that everyone agrees with me, or at least those who are writing. And so thank you. I can't thank you guys enough. Honestly, I can't.
Thank you.
Just so everybody knows, I just want to make one little point. I've seen people ask me about, on the side, ask about where these recordings are and so on. There is a Workbook YouTube channel. All of the recordings are listed there. Currently it's listed 1 through 7. We're gonna be adding more descriptions so that you know which each one of them are. One thing that's worthy to say is that the ones we did in the first week, Heather, I think you can agree, they are not feeling current at all, because the whole concept of where we are now is really weekly, and things change sometimes. Like Vail was saying, you know, she learned something yesterday that she like blew her mind. Things are changing so quickly and so fast. These webinars are really timely, and they need to be viewed in that way. So, you know, everybody should keep that in mind. And Heather told me to say that. Is like, okay, so today is, you know, May 1st, and this webinar is on May 1st, so it's timely right now. Okay, so thank you. I can't thank you all enough, really.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone, and wash your hands.
That wins.
All right.
Thanks so much for doing this.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.